I was 25 years old, standing in a courtroom, watching my mother's face crumble as the judge read her sentence for child endangerment. But that wasn't when I got my revenge. No, my revenge started 14 years earlier, when I was 11 years old and she handed me a crumpled $20 bill, kissed my forehead, and promised she'd be back in 2 weeks. That was the last honest thing Rebecca Martinez ever said to me. What I didn't know then was that she wasn't going to Europe for business. She was going there to erase me. To make sure I'd never know where I really came from, who I really was, or that someone across the ocean had been crying herself to sleep every night for 8 years, begging just to see a photograph of my face. Have you ever been lied to by the person you trusted most? Drop a comment and tell me, because what happened next will make you question everything you think you know about family. She doubted that no one will ever listen and sympathize with me if I ever share it on YouTube. Prove her wrong by subscribing to my channel. The first week alone wasn't so bad, honestly. I was 11, almost 12, and I'd been making my own breakfast since I was 8. Our apartment in suburban Phoenix was small but familiar, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that always smelled like vanilla candles, and walls covered in my school awards and her real estate success photos. She'd left on a Tuesday evening in September, right after that mysterious phone call that made her face go chalk white. She'd packed like a tornado, throwing dresses and makeup into her suitcase, her hands shaking. When I asked what was happening, she just kept repeating the same thing. Business opportunity, baby. Once in a lifetime. Europe. Big clients. She arranged for Mrs. Chen, our 70-something neighbor who could barely hear her own television, to check in occasionally. Then she pressed that 20 into my palm and she was gone. I rationed that money like I was preparing for the apocalypse. $4 for bread and peanut butter. $3 for ramen. $2 for milk. I kept the remaining 11 hidden in my underwear drawer, only to be touched in absolute emergency. School lunches became my main meal. I'd load my tray with everything they'd give me, eating slowly, savoring every bite because dinner would be peanut butter on bread or watery noodles. At night, the apartment felt massive and hostile. Every creak was an intruder. Every car door slamming was someone coming to take me to foster care, which my mom had always warned me about like it was a death sentence. They split up siblings, Sarah. They put you with strangers who only want the check. You stay out of the system. So when Mrs. Chen knocked on day 5, I smiled and lied through my teeth. Oh, she's just working late, Mrs. Chen. Big sale. The old woman nodded and shuffled away. I closed the door and slid down against it, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. 2 weeks came and went. My mother's texts were vague and infuriating. Delayed. Business complicated. Soon, honey. Then, miss you. Be good. Few more days. The few more days became a week. Then 2. I was running out of food and running out of lies. My math teacher pulled me aside on day 19 because I'd worn the same purple hoodie 4 days straight. Everything okay at home, Sarah? I manufactured a story about our washing machine breaking, rambling until he looked uncomfortable and let me go. But I saw him making a note. I saw how he watched me after that. The net was tightening, and I was completely alone. If you've ever felt abandoned by someone who was supposed to protect you, you need to hear what I found next, and trust me, only subscribers get to see how dark this really gets. Hit that button now because this story is about to explode. By week 4, I was desperate enough to invade my mother's bedroom. Her room had always been off limits, her sanctuary, but I needed money immediately. The school was serving fish sticks that day, which I hated, and I'd gagged them down anyway because I had nothing at home except half a jar of peanut butter. My stomach cramped constantly. I'd lost weight I didn't have to lose. So I tore through her dresser, finding nothing but old papers. I checked her closet, pushing aside work blazers and fancy dresses. Then I saw it, a metal lockbox shoved way in the back, with a small combination lock. I tried her birthday. Nothing. I tried my birthday. Click. The lock popped open and my hands trembled as I lifted the lid. What I found was a stack of papers that made no sense for exactly 4 seconds before my entire world shattered like a mirror thrown against concrete. Adoption papers. Official ones, with state seals and legal language I could barely parse. Sarah Maria Ferreira was listed as my birth name, not Sarah Martinez, the name I'd used my entire life. The adoption was finalized when I was 3 years old, pulled from Arizona foster care by Rebecca Martinez. I read the words 5 times. 10 times. I was adopted. I'd been in foster care. Nothing about my life was what I thought it was. The room spun and I sat down hard on my mother's carpet, and I would have stayed there, catatonic, except I saw the letters underneath. 23 letters, bound with a rubber band that had gone brittle with age. I pulled the first one out with shaking fingers. The handwriting was elegant, slanted. It was dated 6 years ago. Dear Rebecca, I am writing to you again to beg you, mother, to let me know my granddaughter. Maria, Sarah, as you call her, is the only connection I have left to my daughter. I know Anna made terrible choices. But Sarah is innocent. She is my blood. Please, Rebecca, I am not asking to take her from you. I am asking only to meet her. Do not let your pain deny this child her heritage. The letter was signed Maria Ferreira, Lisbon, Portugal. My grandmother. I had a grandmother. A real one. Who'd been trying to reach me for years. I tore through the other letters with increasing desperation. Each one was more desperate than the last. Please respond. I'm begging you. She deserves to know her family. The most recent letter was dated 8 weeks ago, 2 months before my mother left for Europe. Rebecca, I know you blocked my emails and changed your phone number again. I've hired a lawyer. If you continue to refuse contact, I will have no choice but to take legal action. She is 11 years old now, soon she'll be old enough to choose for herself. Please don't force me to go to war with you. Most people don't realize that the people they trust most are sometimes hiding the darkest secrets. Comment below if you think my mother was protecting me or destroying me, because what I did next changed everything. The phone call I made that night was the bravest thing I'd ever done. I waited until 1 in the morning, calculated that it would be 9 in the morning in Lisbon, and dialed the number from the most recent letter. My hand shook so violently I misdialed twice. On the 3rd try, it rang. Then a woman's voice, thick with an accent, warm like honey. Hello? I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up. Hello, she said again, switching to English. I forced the words out in a whisper. Is this Maria Ferreira? Silence. Long enough that I thought she'd hung up. Then, barely audible, almost broken, yes. Yes, this is Maria. Who is this? I closed my eyes and the tears came hot and fast. This is Sarah. I'm your granddaughter. The sound she made was something between a sob and a gasp and a prayer. For a moment neither of us could speak, we just cried together across 5,000 miles, 2 strangers who were family. When she finally found her voice, it was shaking with raw emotion. Minhanita. My granddaughter. Oh God, oh thank God. Are you safe? Where are you? Where is Rebecca? And then it all poured out of me. The $20. The lies. Being alone. The fear. Finding the papers. Reading her letters. Learning I was adopted, that she'd been trying to reach me and my mother had blocked her at every turn. Maria listened, and I could hear her crying, whispering things in Portuguese I couldn't understand but felt in my bones. When I finally ran out of words, she spoke with a firmness that reminded me of my mother but warmer, safer. Sarah, listen to me very carefully. What Rebecca did is wrong. Leaving you alone is unforgivable. Keeping you from your family is cruel. I am booking a flight tonight. I will be there in 2 days. Give me your address. I gave it to her. Every detail. She repeated it back twice. Then she said something that made me feel protected for the first time in a month. You are not alone anymore, Pequeña. You will never be alone again. I am coming, and when I get there, we are going to fix this. Together. We talked for another hour. She told me about my biological mother, Anna, who'd struggled with addiction, which was why I'd been taken by the state. She told me about our family in Portugal. She told me I looked just like Anna had at my age. When we finally hung up, the apartment didn't feel quite so empty anymore. On day 32, I woke up to the sound of a key turning in the front door. For a split second I thought I'd imagined it, but then the door swung open and there she was. Rebecca Martinez. My mother. My liar. She looked tanned and rested, her hair freshly cut, wearing a linen blazer I'd never seen before. She was pulling a suitcase and had a shopping bag in her other hand, probably some cheap souvenir to make up for 5 weeks of abandonment. When she saw me standing in the living room, her face lit up with a smile. Baby! Oh my God, I missed you so much. I'm so sorry it took longer then her eyes landed on the coffee table. On the metal lockbox, lid open. On the adoption papers scattered like accusatory evidence. On the letters, 23 of them, spread out in chronological order. The smile died. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like she might faint. The shopping bag slipped from her fingers. Sarah, she said, her voice shaking, her eyes wide with terror. Sarah, sweetheart, let me explain. This isn't, you don't understand, she was about to feed me more lies, but I wasn't that scared little girl anymore. Subscribe right now because what happened in the next 5 minutes will blow your mind, and I promise you've never seen a revenge story end like this one does. Rebecca dropped her suitcase and rushed toward me, her hands reaching out like she was going to hug me or maybe grab the papers, I couldn't tell which. But I stepped back, putting the coffee table between us, and the look on my face must have stopped her cold because she froze mid-step. Don't, I said, and my voice sounded different. Older. Harder. Don't touch me. Don't touch those papers. And don't you dare lie to me again. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. She looked at the adoption certificate in my hands, at Maria's letters spread across the table, and I watched her brain frantically calculating how much I knew, how much damage had been done, whether she could still spin this into something I'd believe. Sarah, baby, I can explain everything. Yes, you were adopted, but I was going to tell you when you were older, when you could understand. I cut her off, my hands shaking so badly the papers rattled. You were never going to tell me. And you weren't in Europe for business, were you? The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Rebecca's face went through 5 different expressions in 3 seconds, denial, panic, anger, fear, and finally something that looked almost like resignation. She sank down onto the arm of the couch, suddenly looking 10 years older. How much did you read? She whispered. All of it, I said. Every single letter. 8 years of letters from my grandmother, begging you to let her meet me. Begging you to at least send her a picture. And you kept them all locked away like they were poison. Rebecca flinched like I'd slapped her. You don't understand what that family put your biological mother through. Anna she was broken, Sarah. Addicted. Abusive. And Maria, she enabled all of it, made excuses, gave her money that went straight to drugs. When I adopted you, I promised myself I'd protect you from all that dysfunction and pain. If you think keeping a child from their family is protection or prison, drop a comment right now, because the truth my mother was hiding was so much worse than dysfunction. So you went to Europe to protect me? I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm I'd never used with her before. Is that what you're calling it? Rebecca looked down at her hands, twisting her rings, and for a long moment I thought she might actually refuse to answer. Then she let out a long, shuddering breath. I went to Lisbon to meet with an international family attorney. Maria had started filing paperwork, claiming grandparent rights, threatening to sue for visitation. The lawyer said that since you were adopted before she ever established a relationship with you, I could petition to have all her claims permanently dismissed and seal your adoption records so thoroughly that she'd never find you again. It was going to cost everything I had saved, but I thought if I could just make this go away, you'd never have to know about any of it. The words hit me like physical blows. She'd spent 5 weeks and thousands of dollars trying to erase my entire biological family from existence. Trying to make sure I'd never know my real name, my real history, my grandmother who loved me. You left me here alone for a month with $20, I said slowly, each word deliberate, while you were in Portugal trying to make sure I'd never meet my own grandmother. Do you understand how insane that is? Rebecca's eyes filled with tears and she reached for me again, but I backed up until I hit the wall. I thought Mrs. Chen would check on you more. I thought 2 weeks, maybe 3 at most. The legal process took longer than expected, there were complications, and I know I should have come home, but I was so close to finishing it, to protecting you, you weren't protecting me. I shouted, and I'd never shouted at my mother before in my life, never raised my voice, never talked back. You were protecting yourself. You were making sure I'd never find out the truth, never question you, never leave you. You kept me because you wanted to own me, not because you loved me. The doorbell rang. Sharp. Insistent. 3 times in quick succession. Rebecca and I both froze, staring at each other, and then at the door like it might explode. Don't answer that, Rebecca said quickly, her voice tight with panic. Sarah, whoever that is, don't, but I was already moving. I crossed the living room in 4 steps and yanked open the door. Standing there was Mrs. Chen, looking more alert than I'd ever seen her, and next to her was a tall woman in a gray pantsuit with a county ID badge clipped to her belt. The woman's expression was professionally neutral but her eyes were sharp, taking in everything, my too-thin frame, my wrinkled clothes, the tension radiating from the apartment behind me. Hello, the woman said gently. I'm Jennifer Rodriguez with Child Protective Services. Mrs. Chen called our office this morning with some concerns. May I come in and speak with you and your mother? Rebecca appeared behind me so fast I jumped. Her face had gone completely white but she'd pulled on her realtor smile, the one she used with difficult clients. Of course. There's been a misunderstanding. I just got back from a business trip and, a month, Mrs. Chen interrupted, her accent thick but her words clear and damning. Gone 1 month. I see this girl alone every day. Too thin. Same clothes. I finally understand, she is alone. No adult. Just child. Jennifer's expression hardened. She looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the exact moment she understood. May I come in, she repeated, but it wasn't really a question anymore. Rebecca stepped back and Jennifer walked into our apartment, Mrs. Chen following behind her like a tiny, elderly avenging angel. Most people think Child Protective Services is the villain, but sometimes they're the only ones telling the truth. Subscribe if you want to see how the system actually worked for once, because what happened next shocked everyone. Jennifer sat down on our couch and pulled out a tablet, her fingers already moving across the screen. Sarah, is it? She asked me, her voice kind. I nodded. Can you tell me how long your mother was away? I looked at Rebecca, who was standing by the kitchen counter gripping the edge so hard her knuckles had gone white. She gave a tiny shake of her head, her eyes pleading. And something in me just broke. I was done protecting her. Done lying. Done being the good, quiet, obedient daughter who kept secrets and stayed invisible. 32 days, I said clearly. She left me $20 and said she'd be back in 2 weeks. She wasn't. Jennifer's pen stopped moving. $20 for 32 days? I nodded. I ate school lunches and rationed ramen and peanut butter. I lied to teachers. I forged her signature on permission slips. I was terrified someone would find out and put me in foster care. Sarah, honey, you're exaggerating, Rebecca said desperately, her realtor voice cracking at the edges. I sent money. I called to check on you. You sent 3 text messages in a month, I said flatly. You never called. Not once. And you didn't send any money. Jennifer looked at Rebecca with an expression I'd seen before, the same look my teacher had given me when he knew I was lying about the washing machine. It was the look of an adult who'd seen this exact story play out 100 times and was tired of the excuses. Ms. Martinez, where exactly were you for the past month? Rebecca opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Europe. Portugal. Business meetings with international clients. Real estate development opportunities. I'm trying to build a better life for us, for 32 days, leaving an 11-year-old alone, with $20. Jennifer's voice was flat. That's not building a better life. That's child endangerment and neglect. The doorbell rang again. Louder this time. More insistent. Rebecca looked at the door like it was an executioner's axe, then at me, and I saw real fear in her eyes for the first time. Not fear for me. Fear of losing control. Fear of consequences. I walked to the door and opened it before she could stop me. Standing on our doorstep was a woman I'd never seen in person but recognized instantly from the oval photograph tucked into one of her letters. She was in her mid-60s with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a bun, olive skin weathered by sun and time, and my eyes. She had my exact eyes. She was gripping a small rolling suitcase in one hand and had the other pressed to her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. Minhanita, Maria Ferreira whispered. My grandmother. My grandmother was here. I didn't remember moving but suddenly I was in her arms and she smelled like lavender and something sweet I couldn't name and she was holding me so tight I could barely breathe but I didn't care. I was sobbing into her shoulder and she was crying and speaking Portuguese and English all mixed together, stroking my hair, kissing the top of my head, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 32 days. Safe. Behind me I heard Rebecca make a sound like a wounded animal. No. No, this can't be happening. I turned to look at her, still in Maria's arms, and watched my mother's face cycle through every stage of grief at once. Maria guided me back into the apartment, her arm around my shoulders, and when Rebecca saw her, really saw her, she actually stumbled backward. You, Rebecca breathed. You can't be here. You have no right. I have every right, Maria said, and her English was accented but clear, her voice steady. I am her avu. Her grandmother. And you have kept her from me for 8 years. Jennifer stood up, her professional mask slipping just enough to show she was piecing this together. Ms. Martinez, is this woman Sarah's biological grandmother? Rebecca's face went through a dozen different expressions before settling on something ugly. She's nobody. She has no legal claim. Sarah is my daughter. I adopted her legally. This woman is the reason you went to Portugal, I said quietly, and everyone turned to look at me. Isn't she, Mom? You weren't there for business. You were there trying to make sure I'd never find her. You went to a lawyer to seal my adoption records forever. The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer's expression shifted from professional concern to cold anger. Is that true? Rebecca didn't answer. She didn't have to. The guilt was written all over her face. Comment below if you think some secrets deserve to be exposed. Because what came out next destroyed my mother's perfect story and gave me back my life. Don't miss the ending. Maria pulled a folder from her bag with shaking hands and passed it to Jennifer. I have been trying to contact Sarah for 8 years. I have copies of every letter I sent, every email Rebecca blocked, every phone number she changed to avoid me. When she went to Lisbon last month, she met with a lawyer named Paulo Andrade to permanently terminate my grandparent rights and seal Sarah's records so I could never find her. I have documentation of everything. She pulled out paper after paper, letters, emails, legal consultation receipts, even a notarized statement from the Portuguese lawyer confirming Rebecca's intentions. Jennifer took the folder and flipped through it, her expression getting harder with each page. MS. Martinez, you left your 11-year-old daughter alone for over a month, with insufficient funds and no proper supervision, to travel overseas and legally erase her biological family from her life. Is that an accurate summary? Rebecca's face crumbled. The realtor mask, the confident mother act, the righteous protector routine, all of it fell away, and what was left was just a terrified woman who knew she'd lost. I was protecting her, she whispered one more time, but even she didn't sound like she believed it anymore. I was trying to give her a clean start, away from all that pain and dysfunction. I thought if she never knew, she'd never be hurt. You hurt me worse than anything my biological mother ever could have, I said, and my voice was steady now, clear. Because she was sick. She had an addiction. But you? You made a choice. Every single day for 8 years, you chose to keep me from my family. You chose to hide who I really was. And when my grandmother tried to reach me, you chose to run away and try to erase her completely. That's not protection. That's control. Jennifer closed her tablet with a decisive click. Ms. Martinez, I'm opening a formal investigation into your fitness as a parent. Given the severity of the neglect and the concerning pattern of behavior, I'll need to interview Sarah privately, inspect the home, and review your financial records to verify your claims about this trip. Mrs. Ferreira, I'll need your contact information as well. Sarah, is there somewhere you'd feel safe staying while we sort this out? I looked at Maria, who nodded immediately. She stays with me. I have hotel room. She is safe with me. Rebecca made a move toward me, but Jennifer stepped between us smoothly. I think that's best for now. Ms. Martinez, I strongly suggest you contact an attorney. I watched my mother, my adoptive mother, I had to remember now, collapse onto the couch, her head in her hands, her shoulders shaking. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to say it would be okay, to be the good daughter I'd always been. But a bigger part of me was done. Done lying. Done protecting her from the consequences of her own choices. Done being small and quiet and grateful. Maria helped me pack a bag while Jennifer documented the apartment, the empty refrigerator, the rationed food in the cupboard, the forged signatures on school papers I'd left on my desk. Mrs. Chen stood in the doorway, nodding approvingly, her arms crossed over her thin chest. As we walked out, Rebecca called after me one last time. Sarah, please. I did everything for you. Everything I did was because I love you. I stopped in the doorway and turned back to look at her. She looked smaller somehow, diminished, like a paper doll that had gotten wet. If you loved me, I said quietly, you would have told me the truth. You would have let me choose. You would have trusted me enough to know my own story. Then I walked out with my grandmother's arm around me, and I didn't look back. The investigation took 3 months. Rebecca was charged with child endangerment and neglect. She lost custody temporarily, then permanently when it came out that she'd also been embezzling from her real estate clients to fund the Portugal trip and legal fees. The business opportunity had been a lie. Everything had been a lie. The court granted Maria visitation rights first, then partial custody, and eventually gave me the choice of where I wanted to live. I chose to split my time. Summers in Portugal with Maria and her family, school year in Phoenix with a foster family who actually checked on me, who asked about my homework, who made sure I ate. Rebecca was sentenced to community service, fines, mandatory parenting classes she'd never get to use, and probation. But the real punishment was quieter. She lost me. Not physically, I still saw her occasionally, supervised visits where she cried and apologized and tried to explain. But I was never her daughter again, not in the way I had been. Years later, standing in that courtroom at 25, watching her be sentenced for fraud and embezzlement, I felt something I didn't expect. Not satisfaction exactly. Not quite revenge. More like closure. She'd spent my entire childhood trying to control my story, trying to decide who I was allowed to be, who I was allowed to know, who I was allowed to love. And in the end, all her controlling and lying and hiding had cost her everything, her career, her freedom, her reputation, and me. The $20 bill she'd left me when I was 11 had taught me exactly what I was worth to her. But finding those letters, calling my grandmother, exposing the truth, that taught me what I was worth to myself. Some people call what I did revenge. I call it justice. I call it taking back my own story. I call it refusing to let someone else decide who I get to be. If this story taught you anything about standing up for your truth, hit that like button and subscribe, because everyone deserves to know their own story, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to stay silent. What would you have done in my situation? Tell me in the comments, and thank you for listening to mine.